Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, you guys aren't going to know this, but I'm actually recording this episode literally on the 29th, which, for those who don't know, vastly different time than I usually record this. Well, simply put, it's because I may be going on vacation, so, I wanted to make sure that you had all this stuff ready. And to even, satiate you even more, I even did some scheduled stuff. I also recorded the Patreon exclusive ENDORSES episode 3 reaction early. And I recorded, I didn't record, but, I edited the next video a little bit so that I would have it, halfway done before I return. Because we still got some time before that video comes out. I'll be back before that video comes out, and I'll have plenty of time to record. I'll be back on the 5th, literally exactly a week after I'm recording this, and that video doesn't come out until the 13th, but, I just figured giving myself a little bit of an early time to do it, and I even scheduled a poll that will be done during my break, so, you can do that and look over that, and it could help a future subject for a video. I did all this because I love you guys. Now, if only that love was actually requited, and I'm only saying this so that I can let you know that this is being recorded before the new episode comes out. By the way, I hope you like it. And so that if anything big happens on Thursday or Friday or Saturday, I don't know it yet. But I think I got basically all the important news for the week, I guess. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, coming from across the ocean, Humza Yousaf is announced as the Scottish National Party's new leader, replacing Nicola Sturgeon. Now, I don't know if I made a story where I talked about when Nicola Sturgeon retired, but I don't know if I mentioned when they were looking for new candidates and Humza Yousaf was floated as a candidate. For starters, he is the first Scottish Asian and Muslim to serve in the office of Scottish First Minister. The person who is basically the Prime Minister of Scotland, in charge of Scotland and whatever, as the head of the ruling party and such. But also, what was interesting is politics. You see, because politics were actually quite divided within this upcoming, thing. Because if you remember, one of the big things that was going on due to that was in regards to LGBTQ rights and stuff, but the Scottish National Party is a multi-tendency party, or a big tent party, so they basically allow a lot of people in. He had two major opponents, both female, Kate Forbes and Ash Regan, and they were noticeably different from Yousaf for a couple of major reasons. On a first glance, they were just aesthetic differences. They were women, and Yousaf was not. They were white, and Yousaf was not. And they were different religions. Forbes and Reagan being Christian, and Yousaf being Muslim. Actually, I'm making an assumption for Reagan. I don't know what her particular religious beliefs were, because they don't really list them on the pages. But basically, they were noticeably different for a lot of reasons. But that actually led to a little bit of interestingness in regards to policy. You see, because Forbes and Reagan were essentially TERFs, or, I don't even know if they were just TERFs. I think they were just, full-on, I think Reagan was a TERF. Forbes, I don't know what Forbes was. I think she was just transphobic, and that was the big tent, because, one of the big things, the whole point of the Scottish National Party is essentially Scottish independence. That's basically the one and only thing they're good at, and they basically let anybody in as long as you adhere to that viewpoint. And as such, they have a lot of divides in regards to a lot of other policies, and one of the biggest ones for this one was LGBTQ policies. Forbes and Reagan, both being part of an anti-LGBTQ movement within the party. Forbes was trying to do the thing where she's oh no, you see, I'm personally against LGBTQ rights, but I wouldn't actually govern that way, but her being very openly part of anti-LGBTQ religious movements made people question whether or not she would be a good candidate. Yousaf, he actually was a very socially progressive person, and so it's actually a good thing that he managed to win. I don't know much about the ins and outs of Yousaf, but I do believe that since he is the most socially progressive of the three, at least there was a W there. at least one party in the UK shifting to the left. But of course, bigger news story in that area is the situation going on with Jeremy Corbyn. You see, remember not long ago, Keir Starmer made the announcement that Jeremy Corbyn would not be allowed to run in his seat in Islington North, at least as the Labour Party candidate. And that led to a huge divide within a lot of people in the UK left. And even now, the media is sort of trying to, spin things. One of the big things nowadays is, if you, Keir Starmer, do not believe Jeremy Corbyn should be the candidate in Islington North, why the heck did you run him and say that he was the only good candidate when, previously, when he was the Labour leader? And he said, and basically Keir Starmer just said, look, I was with Corbyn because he was the winner, but now that I can dump Corbyn, I'll dump Corbyn. And basically everybody in the UK is gearing up for the next general election, even though it still isn't going to be for a while. But they're making all the necessary preparations for the next cycle. You see, because up to that point, that was basically an informal announcement. But now it has been officially announced that the Labour Committee has announced that just 22-12, that they will not be allowing Jeremy Corbyn to be the Labour candidate in Islington North. And in response, Jeremy Corbyn made a statement, which I will read part of it here. When I was leader of the Labour Party, I was determined to build a member-led movement that gave hope to a new generation. Today's disgraceful move shows contempt for the millions of people who voted for our party in 2017 and 2019, and will demotivate those who still believe in the importance of a transformative Labour government. Now more than ever, we should be offering a bold alternative to the government's program of poverty, division, and repression. Keir Starmer has instead launched an assault on the rights of his own Labour members, breaking his pledge to build a united and democratic party that advances social, economic, and climate justice. I will not be intimidated into silence. I have spent my life fighting for a fair society on behalf of the people of Islington North, and I have no intention of stopping now. Basically, well, that, and another statement that was released to a paper right before that, the vote, basically indicated that Corbyn is going to run as an independent candidate in the race. And I'm 100% ecstatic with that, and I actually do believe that Corbyn should go one step further and try to build a party outside the Labour Party, because at this point, there really is no saving the Labour Party. It's done. It is done. The only thing that is left to do is to just fight for a better party in general, because there really is no saving the Labour Party anymore. The Labour Party's made it abundantly clear that they don't want to be in the Corbyn wing anymore. And as such, they shouldn't get the Corbyn wing support. Maybe that bodes well for them, maybe it bodes terrible for them. I don't know, doesn't matter. Nothing matters at this point. But anyways, let's go to the United States, and we're going to talk about this news story that happened literally the day after I recorded the last podcast, or the day before I released the last podcast. The Democratic field in the California Senate race is coalescing because Khanna, who was teetering on whether or not to run for the seat, made an announcement that he was not going to be running for the seat and would instead back Barbara Lee, a thing that he said he was going to do. And not only that, it was announced that he was going to co-chair her campaign. Now, the thing is, he made that announcement, he made an announcement before his announcement where he was like, I'm going to be announcing something really big on CNN. And everyone was like, oh, bro, better not be what I think it is. And it's like, oh, this is exactly what it should have been. Congratulations. And with that, I think most people have kind of turned off their brains for the California field because there really is nothing left to happen. The only thing that some people are kind of gleaming on is maybe because Dianne Feinstein has not been in the Senate chambers for a while, and neither has John Fetterman. There's some speculation on whether or not they will actually, or at the very least Feinstein, whether or not she will remain in her seat for the remainder of her term, or she might retire early. I don't think it's likely that she retires early. I think she will just leave when it's her time to go. But there are some people who are worrying that maybe Feinstein is going to retire early, and then, due to her retiring early, they're going to try and appoint one of the other people in the Senate early, and that it would be terrible for California to have Newsom choose the two senators, And they're even trying to push for, like, him to pick a caretaker senator, which is kind of weird considering Barbara Lee has essentially pitched herself as a caretaker senator to a degree. But like I said, I think most people have generally turned off because I think there really is no other route left. There technically is, but let me explain how the California Senate race is now. Like, there were some people who did genuinely want Khanna to run for the Senate seat anyways, but the fact of the matter is, he really had no route left. So, in the Democratic side, there are already 3 fields being played. Adam Schiff is trying to run as the safe candidate and trying to use his anti-Trump rhetoric as like a stepping stone to the Senate seat. Katie Porter, she's not only trying to do like a sort of like progressive bona fides, but also to a degree, she's trying to pitch herself as like a safe progressive, like Warren. But she even did one thing that I guarantee you that Schiff wanted to do, but he was trying to be nice and waited for Feinstein to do something, because she did the thing that a lot of other people are doing, where they're announcing like way early ahead of time so that they can be, because they made it abundantly clear, Democrats do not want democracy. Democrats do not want democracy anymore. What they want is one person to announce that they're the candidates and then just go with it forever. Even though literally the whole point of a primary candidacy is to show if a candidate has viability. That's literally the whole point of a primary candidacy, which many people from both the Democrats and Republicans, they do not seem to grasp. The point is for that candidate to make their candidacy viable on their own. It doesn't work when you shovel tons of money into them and then get shocked. Wait, they lost? But we shoveled $10,000 million behind them in the primary. Yeah, when you shovel all the money in the primary for this one person without even thinking on whether or not they can continue keeping that money train going when they expand to people who are not you, well, shock of all shocks, it's not gonna work. Lee, her route is also progressivism, but also identity politics related. You see, her thing is that she's running as, we don't have a black woman in the Senate, ergo, we need one. But she is also running as a progressive candidate. She's running as the Katie Porter isn't a real progressive, I am type crowd. She's essentially running to the Bernie crack crowd. And with the whole previous thing, she's also running to the Kamala Harris crowd. But here's one big problem. You see, as a black candidate, she unfortunately does not have that good fundraising. But, that's not like it being, mean or anything. That's a fact. That is a legitimate fact, unfortunate. You look at, black candidates, and unfortunately, they don't raise a lot of money. But with Roe backing her, that's basically a sign to get Bernie and, progressive groups to try and back her as well, and, get their money in the race, even though I think they were probably going to go to her anyways. But I do think, apparently there was some hesitancy from some people to back Barbara Lee because of her backing Kamala Harris for president, even though that's stupid. There is still speculation on whether or not another Democrat might enter the race, like Lou Carrera, Gavin Newsom, Xavier Becerra, or the lieutenant governor, but really at this point, I think the field has basically been narrowed. Especially with one more thing with the Democrat side. You see, there's actually a divide on where they live. Both Schiff and Porter live in the South, meanwhile, Barbara Lee is in the North, so of course she's going to shore up those voters as well. There is one big speculation, though. With 3 prominent Democrats in the race, is there room for anybody else? Is there room for another Democrat? Or is there room for a Republican or an independent? People are trying to figure out. And fortunately for me, but unfortunately for them, the California Republican Party really has no clue what to do. The only person in their state that they think could actually mount a viable campaign is Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Arnold Schwarzenegger does not want to run with the modern-day Republican Party. The only other people they have are people who are literally just nobodies. There's the guy who lost in 2022 by a large margin. There's a guy who couldn't even make a viable gubernatorial candidacy. There was the guy who was in charge of the failed recall. There was a runner-up for governor in the last cycle. And there's the runner-up for state controller. they really don't have that many viable candidacies that they can go off of. But anyways, speaking of Barbara Lee, we actually have something very interesting that happened. You see, for those who don't remember, we had this whole thing about how there was a bill that was going to, end the authorizations for military force in Iraq. You know, the thing that Barbara Lee made her thing, being the sole representative to vote against it. And the bill to, pull the authorization of Iraq actually passed by a pretty decent margin, 66-30. Now, we really don't have to do much to understand about the Republicans. You see, basically, a majority of the Republican Party voted against it. You know, let's just go over some big names that you might know. Capito, Ernst, Graham, Kennedy, Mullen, Romney, Thune, Tillis, Scott, the other Scott. I don't know if I said Cotton yet, but if I did, I'd just say Cotton again. You know, basically all the typical people who would vote for, like the neocons. And big claps. No Democrat voted yeah. There were 4 people who didn't vote at all. Chris Coons, Dianne Feinstein, John K. Fetterman, and Mitch McConnell. And that's because Dianne Feinstein, I don't know where the heck she is, and I don't even know where Chris Coons is. But of course, Fetterman and McConnell are in the hospital. Fetterman's officially going to come out of the hospital pretty soon. And I will say one big thing, this is basically nothing, but I have to just say it, just because this is a slight rant. I am kind of disappointed that Fetterman hasn't really done much. Legitimately, I was so excited for Fetterman to get into Senate, because I was so excited for him to do a lot of good things, but unfortunately, due to his stroke and his depression, he just hasn't done anything. The only thing that he has basically done is keep a Republican out of the seat, which is a good thing, but it's I kind of wanted you to actually, do stuff. They can't even put his name on, there's a website, I think it's called VoteView, or, I think it's VoteView, and they basically put all of the senators and, people on, political spectrums, and they literally say for Fetterman, we can't put him on a spectrum because he hasn't done enough votes. But anyways, we'll get off of that for a little bit, and I'll just give some praise to some people who voted yeah, and, to end this. First of all, basically all the Democrats did vote for it, even the ones that you probably wouldn't expect, like Schumer. Well, actually, I do kind of expect Schumer, because I think, for the most part, everybody accepts that this is basically over. Aside from the neocons, there really is no room in the Democratic Party to do this. To exert soft power, that's one thing. But to exert, big power like this, that's another thing. All 3 independents voted yeah. But what is interesting is that there were a decent number of Republicans that voted yeah as well. Now, most of them are ones that you'd expect. Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Murkowski, Collins, Hawley, Braun, the people who are sort of the, anti-establishment candidates. But I guess I'll have to give one slight praise to Ted Budd, one of my senators, who actually decided to vote for the repeal as well. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that it's, he's basically trying to do the whole, Trump thing. I think literally it's because Trump, this guy's trying to paint himself as, the pro-Trump guy. He's one of the, hardcore right-wing Republicans. And I think Trump has basically, waffled on a lot of foreign policy stances, but I think the one that he has not waffled on is Iraq, at least since he became president, or since he became a politician. But anyways, last news story, saddest news story, the Nashville school shooting. For those who don't know, please skip ahead, because it's just kind of sad. I tried to make a vow to not talk about mass shootings and school shootings anymore, but this one I had to make an exception because this one has become incredibly politicized. But I will have to keep censoring myself because there are some things that I want to say that if I did say them, certain things would happen to me. And I know that because I'm on the left, so of course, anything that I say that is considered radical or extreme, all of a sudden, I have to be silenced. But if a right-winger says literally anything, they're paraded around. They're given check marks. Literally, due to the freaking stupidity of Elon Musk's new Twitter things, a fake news story was able to be spread around throughout the entirety of the internet because of just how he's run Twitter into the ground. because of the whole you can just buy a verification badge. The TLDR of the situation was that there was a trans man went into a Christian private school and killed 3 students and 3 teachers. And according to police, they investigated the person's home and discovered weapons and a manifesto. They have not released it at the moment, but given the fact that this area seems to be an incredibly Presbyterian, conservative area of the United States, the working assumption is that perhaps that this individual was not accepted by their community, and they took out their aggression on this group of people. And then we had the whole song and dance that happens every time a mass shooting happen in front of us. Thoughts and prayers. We need to do action. We can't do action. That's being political. We need to wait until things calm down before we can take political action. Investigate literally every single tiny minute detail about the shooter so that we can exploit it for whatever needs we want. And the fact that this shooter happened to be transgender made the right wing go and do another spiel that they are very common to do, being supportive of gun rights until a minority group wants to do those gun rights. Because after that, all of a sudden, now they want to ban, they want to use gender dysphoria as a way to ban people from having guns, which is weird. You don't do that for any other mental illnesses. But there's no point in even doing the whole thing, because again, we've seen the song and dance before, where we're seeing people now go see, now the conservatives are being anti-gun because they want to ban trans people from having guns. It's and they go, isn't that a little inconsistent with your ideology? And it's no fucking shit. It is contradictory to their ideology. Of course it is. Guys, can we literally stop doing the trying to catch conservatives in hypocrisy? They don't care. They literally do not care. Why do we have to keep faking being surprised when conservatives do something that is against their own ideology? Why do we have to keep doing this? You guys claim to be against groomers, but you support churches, and churches have the most child molesters. They know this. You say you support gun rights, but then when a minority group tries to do their gun rights, then all of a sudden you're against it. We know this. We understand this. We know this. You claim it's a mental health issue, but then when we actually try to address mental health issues, you don't want to do anything. They understand this. Conservatives do not want to actually address real problems. They want to make up problems and then fix those. That's the conservative manifesto. They make up a problem, they create a problem, and then they get to claim credit for trying to fix the problem they created by making the situation actively worse. I'll give an example that one person in my personal life doesn't seem to grasp. Social programs, like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. Conservatives, these literal bumfuck conservatives who literally live in shacks of dirt will sit there and be we need to cut Social Security because when I needed to get help, they wouldn't give me nothing, but then they give them to all these women with 8 children. And it's do you not understand how we got to that point? We got to that point because conservatives cut the Social Security spending so much so that literally the only funding they have can go to certain people, that these kinds of programs can only go to certain people. They have to go to literally the people who, quote unquote, need it the most. People who have tons of children. People who don't have, who have a disability, who can't work or anything like that. And then they say, oh, you need to be in a really, 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 really small threshold. And if you make even 1 cent more than that threshold, then all of that money that we gave you, we're taking it away. The programs get spread so literally razor thin that there is literally no way that they can give you anything. And then the conservative is going to do that. He's going to do that to that thing. And then it's going to turn to you and say, the only solution we have now is to just cut the program entirely. And they're going to trick you into thinking that that's the solution. Conservatives do it with every single problem. They create it, and then they go around trying to get pats on the back for fixing a problem that they created. And that currently is what they're doing with trans people. They created the groomer panic. They created the radical trans person argument. They created the whole bathroom argument. They turned trans people into this evil boogeyman, and now they're going to try and claim credit for trying to solve the problem by whatever stupid bullshit reason they have. And here's the one extremely hot take that I can say that I think I won't get in trouble for. With conservatives keep doing this, when the conservatives keep doing the whole like BS with this trans people stuff, more things like this are going to happen. Because this is historically how these kinds of problems will lead to. And anybody who knew anything about anything could understand this. The rise in white supremacist mass shootings was done in a way similar to this. They viewed white people as becoming a minority or whatever, and they're like, we have to stop them. And that's why they went out and did what they did. Terrorists in the Middle East, they view them as the evil boogeyman who is trying to destroy their way of life, and that's why they do what they do. But unlike those people, trans people are being legitimately threatened in the United States. Whatever fake threats that Kekistani69 user on 4chan had, trans people have real legitimate threats against them. No, those 9-year-old children definitely were not the threat to the trans person. But the thing is, when, again, these people who are in the ability to commit mass shootings, they're not thinking rationally. You do not understand that. Like when those fucking like frail, scrawny white kids shoot up their schools. They're not going after the bullies. They're just trying to take out their aggression on anybody who gets in their way. The fucking Kekistani guy isn't going after George Soros or whatever. He's just going to go and take his aggression out to some random people on the streets. And with this situation as well, they're not going to go after the people who are legitimately threatening them, Republican officials. They're not going to go after them. What they're going to do is they're going to take out their aggression on whoever they can find. Republicans share 100% of the blame for the shooting if that turns out to be the motive. I should reiterate, this is based on an assumption of the motive. For all we know, the manifesto could literally say like they didn't care about them being trans, they just wanted to murder a bunch of children. When you spend a majority of your time beating on a oppressed group, don't be shocked when one day randomly they decide to punch back. Like, if literally the least oppressed people in the world, cis straight white men, can still feel like they're being suppressed in society, then what do you think will happen when an actual oppressed person, it clicks in their head and then they just lose it? To quote a cinematic masterpiece, what do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that abandons them and treats them like trash? I need not finish the quote. If you know it, you know it. With that out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of this video. We're going to be talking about the Paraguay election. Now, this is one of those foreign elections that I was kind of interested in, kind of lost interest in, and then I basically asked my followers, do you guys want me to keep doing this episode? And then they chose, yeah, to keep doing it. And I will say, I was kind of hesitant to continue doing it because this election isn't that interesting, but it is kind of interesting. You know, it won't be top tier of this year's election videos, but it will be interesting nonetheless, especially with some developments that happened extremely recently. But first, the prelude. Like a lot of other Latin American elections, we got to go a little bit further back than the last election to understand the importance of this election. We have to go all the way back to 1954. Wait, don't click away yet. It won't take that long. Okay, so 1954, there was a military coup which ended with a man by the name of Alfredo Stronser to become the country's dictator for 35 years. Surprisingly, not a lot of people were happy about it, and there was a lot of rising opposition against him. But nothing really came until members of his own party and military led a counter-coup against his government in 1989. The country soon transitioning to an official democracy in 1993. However, since this was done by his own party, essentially nothing really changed. All that changed was the man in power. You see, there's different types of coups and revolutions in the history of coups and revolutions. Some will literally change the government incredibly drastically, and then others are basically just, we don't like the person in charge, and that's the only issue we have. This was one of those ones. So even though, the opposition of the military dictatorship in total was basically led by people who were not part of like a conservative far-right type mentality. Unfortunately, this conservative right-wing mentality remained the popular dominant force in Paraguay, at least until 2008, when a Catholic bishop by the name of Fernando Lugo ran a multi-party alliance called the Patriotic Alliance for Change, which sought to unite the opposition to end the ruling party's 61-year tenure, and he managed to pull it off, despite many painting him as the next Chavez or Morales. Lugo had some high ambitions for his administration. He wanted to reject the presidential salary, switch the country's democratic relations from Taiwan to China, enact a single-payer healthcare system, have a more positive position with the indigenous population, investing in low-income housing, land reform, etc. And he was literally on his way to do all those things. But then, not even one full year into his administration, WikiLeaks dropped a massive bombshell stating that the people who were opposing Lugo were floating the idea of impeaching him as a way to retain power. And they were basically waiting for any excuse to do so. So in May of 2012, a bunch of farmers occupied the land of a former senator, claiming it was stolen from them under the dictatorship. Police were sent to deal with it, but then they started firing at each other. Accusations of a far-left militant group called the Paraguayan People's Army being involved floated around. Lugo's administration took the heat for all this stuff, so he ended up getting impeached by wide margins. He denounced the impeachment as a coup against him, as did many other nations, but unfortunately, there was really nothing they could do. And unfortunately, due to this massive, upset, due to how people felt about him at the time, the right wing essentially swooped in, said, hey, we oppose everything Lugo stands for, and won the next two elections pretty decently. Even though the dictatorship is still really hated in Paraguay, the right wing very much is still aligned with the dictatorship. Fun fact, the incumbent president, Mario Abdo Benitez, is the son of the Secretary of Stroessner and was a pallbearer at his funeral. So yeah, literal direct line from the dictatorship to the current conservative party nowadays. So there really isn't much to say, you see, because I was originally intending to look into the current administration to see, is there anything major bad about him? And really, no. There wasn't a big, it wasn't like Colombia or Brazil where there was big major things that happened. This right-wing conservative administration basically just governed right-wing conservative. They really, so outside of being the pallbearer at a dictator's funeral, he's really maintained the ability to be inoffensive. But what are the major issues of the campaign? You see, this campaign has two major issues, it seems. Well, there are a lot, but the two ones that seem to be the biggest issues are corruption, because that's a common thing that most administrations and presidential, campaigns try to tackle, corruption. But one that has remained big is China versus Taiwan. You see, as I mentioned before, the country of Paraguay, much like a lot of other Latin American countries, have diplomatic relations with Taiwan, and now some people are suggesting that maybe it should be changed to China, not really due to anything politically, but mostly just due to economics. Being allied with Taiwan, not really that much of a money maker. Being aligned with China, all of a sudden the money starts rolling in. Now let's get into the candidates themselves. There are currently 13 people running for president of Paraguay, but this is where I have to explain a little bit about Paraguay's elections. You see, Paraguay, at least in the legislative chamber, they have proportional representation. So, due to that, only 10 parties are represented in their legislative branches. But there are some interesting things. One of them is currently the legislative coalition of the last election cycle, which currently does not exist anymore. And also, a majority of those parties are sort of in an alliance with each other. So that begs the question, okay, so how does this work for the presidency? Well, you see, due to this, only 4 of the parties that are in the legislative branch are actually running presidential candidates. And even then, one of them, like Jorge Humberto Gomez of the National Union of Ethical Citizens, like, his party really only has 1 seat in the Senate, and that was like... So, as you can tell, I don't think he's going to be playing that much of a factor. A lot of the other ones are new parties or new people. And that has led to a lot of people to kind of look at certain candidates a little bit more off. Okay, so for starters, 8 of the 13 are of new political parties or of parties that are not represented currently in the legislative chamber. So, for the most part, many people just count them out. But then, at least 2 of the people who were counted out are prevalent. So it's like, But also, one of the parties that is currently running somebody is really not prevalent. So, of course, obviously, very much not really in the mood to talk about all of the candidates, considering most of them are basically just name, party, that's it. And most people have basically decided that it's a 2-person race anyways, so, like, again, it doesn't really matter much. But the Paraguayan media has actually stated that there are at least 3 other candidates that are somewhat important to the race. So it's essentially 2 plus 3. But even that might not be lasting, at least for a little bit. So we'll get to that when we get to that. So for now, let's just get into the 5 candidates that the Paraguayan media has stated are basically the only candidates that matter. First, we have Jose Luis Chilavert, former soccer goalkeeper. He's running under the Youth Party, a centrist party that intends to focus on the interests of the youth. There really is not much known about his candidacy other than vague denunciation of corruption. Now you might be wondering, if there's really not much else to say, why are you talking about him? It's because he's a very prevalent soccer player in Paraguay, and that's basically what he's running on. That's the only reason that he's remained in the polls, and it's basically the equivalent of people who are trying to push Lionel Messi to run in Argentina. And I literally only included him for that reason, because I'm pretty sure there would be some people, actually there won't be, because I don't think many people even care about this election, that would probably be wondering why I didn't include him, even though he is included in a majority of the polls. So the next candidate is Paraguayo Cubas, a media personality and former member of Congress who is known for his very hardline stances. Think of him as Paraguay's Rush Limbaugh. I know it's kind of weird using the comparison of I know it's kind of just odd using that comparison for basically every, country that's not America, but yeah, a lot of Americans, we need that comparison. Except he does things that are a little bit more than harsh words. First, he was expelled from the Senate in 2019 for confronting the police. He was also known for throwing water at Senate colleague and shitting on a judge's desk. He's running under the National Crusade Party, a center right-wing populist party. His platform calls for extreme anti-corruption, even pushing for the death penalty on corrupted officials, reducing taxes and smaller governments, but also making the presidency a stronger office. I think one other thing, not to do the whole thing like that again, but I'm going to compare him to another Latin American candidate, Jaime Calderon from Mexico. For those who don't remember, Jaime Calderon was this right-wing populist guy who ran for president of Mexico in 2018, who his major campaign push was that he was going to cut off the hands of corrupt officials, and that would be his big thing. The next candidate is Eslides Acevedo. He is a former member of Abedo's cabinet and a former center-left senator. He is running under a political party called the New Republic Movement, a supposedly center-right party. I say supposedly because there is this weird divide on what to classify his candidacy as. Because as I mentioned before, his party is center-right, but as I mentioned before, he used to be a center-left government official, but he's currently leading a right-wing, he's currently part of a right-wing administration. So essentially, it's going to be a split the difference thing. He's going to run center-left, but his party's going to campaign center-right. But actually, some things in their platform are pretty left-wing. And they're trying to, and it seems like they're trying to run a whole not left, not right, forward candidacy. You know, like they're trying to basically say, like, we're going to unite all Paraguayans together to fight for, like, the truth and safety of the nation. Like, he's sort of trying to appeal to people who are dissatisfied with either of the two major parties, but due to the center-right leanings of his party, they're aiming for a particular crowd. But Acevedo might be appealing to a different version of that crowd, like at least appealing to a different crowd, because he even made the step of choosing the doctor of Fernando Lugo, Jorge Quereri, as his running mate. I'm not mentioning the running mates because the running mates, I don't know if they're that important in this country. So him and his party advocate for these platform planks: land redistribution and free secular public education, two things very out of most Latin American left-wing governments' handbooks. But Acevedo himself stands for decentralizing healthcare, improving public safety, trying to bolster economic growth, and convening all parts of society to create an economic pact. Now, the next candidate is Santiago Peña, the former Minister of Finance under President Horace Cartes. He is the candidate of the ruling National Republican Association Colorado Party, the party that ruled Paraguay for 70 of the past 75 years. His platform calls for reducing the debt, cutting spending, pushing economic integration with South America, and maintaining economic ties with Taiwan. And the last major candidate is Efrain Alegre, the Minister of Public Works and Communications under Lugo and two-time presidential candidate. He is running under the coalition Concertación 2023, a big tent coalition of opposition parties attempting to fight the Colorados. Now, this is actually a step down from the last coalition he had, Ganar, which currently has quite a number of people still in the Chamber of Deputies and stuff, because this one is a more expansive coalition, including many parties that aren't even that prevalent in Paraguay. But for the sake of this, we will mention all of the members of the coalition that currently do have seats in the parliament. First, we have the National Encounter Party, a third-way political party. Next, we have the Hagamos Party, a centrist political party. Next, we have the Progressive Democratic Party, a social democratic socialist party. We have the Beloved Fatherland Party, a conservative liberal party. We have the Guasu Front, a socialist party formed by Fernando Lugo to continue his platform after his impeachment. We'll put a pin on that later. But next, the biggest one is the Authentic Radical Liberal Party, a liberal party that is Paraguay's longest-standing opposition to the Colorados, which is the primary party of Alegre. His platform calls for investigating corruption in the Colorado Party and contraband traffickers, severing diplomatic ties with Taiwan and working with China to boost the economy, and expanding the social safety net. Now, naturally, this race is basically a battle between Peña and Alegre, but Acevedo and Cubas have had a lot of attention put on them because a lot of people say that they could potentially play spoilers to one of the other two candidates. But the thing is, not that many people can actually pinpoint two, and I'll get to a reason why in a little bit, but first, Cubas. You see, Cubas, you might think, oh, well, he might naturally play spoiler to Peña due to him being a right-winger, but actually no. The Paraguayan media has actually stated that they believe that he could actually play spoiler to Alegre because the party that Cubas was part of, the National Crusade Party, was originally part of the coalition with Alegre before they split off to run solo. And Acevedo, basically everybody's been trying to say he's going to play spoiler for the right-wingers due to the fact that he was in a right-wing administration. And originally it seemed like that was a done deal. But then one more thing happened, like just recently, that very much, like, and it kind of makes me realize that maybe me doing this early might have been a bad idea. But this kind of completely changes the race. You see, on March 27th, a bombshell dropped when a letter signed by Fernando Lugo was released after he returned to Paraguay after taking treatment. announcing that the Guasu Front would leave the Concertacion and would not be supporting Alegre's presidential bid when the race comes, which has led to many people wonder, wait, is this true? And it turns out, yes, it is true. In fact, there was another left-wing party in the coalition, a very small one, like the Movement for Socialism, that also announced that they would be leaving the coalition. And you might be wondering, why? Well, actually, apparently, Lugo's doctor actually had some very invaluable insight. See, apparently, he stated that the coalition was fumbling from day one because the Guasu Front, they had a list of demands that Alegre did not want to comply with. And due to that, the party essentially split off into two groups. One who wanted to continue to support Alegre due to the fact that Alegre is very much the most likely person to be running and winning against Peña. But there was also a subsection which was led by Querere, which was, of course, the faction that would end up be backing Acevedo. And now, the only person who can actually make any sense of this would be if Lugo himself makes an announcement of an endorsement. But he's, like, Querere has made it very abundantly clear that it is not a good idea because he suffered a stroke, so it would be best for him to just remain in a sort of, like remain in rest, essentially. And now let's get into it. Polling. You see, originally, polling for this race seemed to be a done deal. Peña was very easily winning, like, in the pre-election phase, but then also, like, when the race was sort of starting to, like, come forward. The race seemed pretty easy, but then Efrain Alegre started winning. Like, here are the polls that I have on the wiki. 42-19 originally in February 2nd, February 6th, 46-24, February 20th, 35-38. See, he wins. But then next, 41-28. Then, continuing in February, 33 with Alegre to 30 for Peña, 39 Alegre to 35 Peña, 42 Peña to 32 Alegre, and the most recent one that's on here is on the 15th of March, which has 38 Alegre to 36 Peña. And that is also including the fact that Cubas has steadily gained, like, Cubas has basically remained sort of in, like, he remains very much in third, like, with usually double-digit points. So many people wonder, like, is the spoiler effect really working here? But there is actually one poll that was published by Multi-Target that has quite a very interesting one. You see, here's the poll that is conducted. Okay, so the poll has some of the smaller candidates that nobody cares about with very limited amount. Chivayart with 2.7, Acevedo with 3.4, and then next we have Alegre with 22.2, Cubas with 24.7, and Peña with 46.4. So this is one of those ones where it's like, we can't even count out that there might be an upset for another candidate. But then basically the next poll that was conducted by a different polling company showed basically Cubas back in like a small percentage. Like it's one of those things where it's probably like polling different areas will lead to different results. Maybe there's some areas that legitimately just do not want to like vote for Alegre and will just vote for any other candidate. I think one thing that might determine what happens next is if Lugo makes a statement. Because I think if Lugo remains quiet, I think a majority of his party is going to remain in the camp with Alegre. Like even if it's just for a just get the conservatives out and then maybe we can win in the future. But if he does anything except like staying, if he endorses Alegre, that would be great. If he doesn't endorse Alegre and just stays quiet, then that's fine. But if he does anything else, like endorses any other candidate in the race, then Alegre is kind of screwed. So I really don't know where this race is going to go at this point. if I had to take a wild guess, I'd say Peña probably wins, but, you know, I can't really do anything to indicate what'll happen next. That's up for Paraguay to decide. And do I support anybody in this race? Not really. I was really hoping for a Guasu Front person to become the nominee, so then I could say, like, pink tide coming, but no. Alegre is basically like a lib. Like, I mean, if that's, like, I mean, if you're in Paraguay, you should probably vote for Alegre, you know, just in case, but, you know, there's really not much else to say. I did briefly consider looking into Acevedo a little further, maybe, like, giving my tepid support of him, but again, like, there really is not much point. Like, I mean, even the tiniest amounts of left-wing activity in him are basically being shadowed by his party being center-right and the fact that he worked in a right-wing government. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And for some more content from me, you can go to our website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.